Okay, I think we're live. Still have a screen share going. All right, here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the monthly Holo Delivery Brief and AMA. So I know we have some familiar folks out there on the chat today, so welcome. And also welcome to anybody new who's joining us for the first time. So for those of you who are new, I'm Mary Camacho. I'm the CEO of Holo. And these are monthly sessions where we provide updates and give a little bit of a view into our strategic infrastructure evolution and engage directly with questions. So before we dive into our monthly delivery updates, just a quick reminder, we launched our new brand and website recently. And we also just published our latest blog post on the Layer 2 hot liquidity and DeFi functionality. So check it out at holo.host/blog. And this represents a big step forward for us in creating, some practical financial infrastructure within the distributed systems. I know this isn't something we've done a whole lot of in the past in terms of really doing more for our token community, and we're going to be talking more about that in the coming weeks and months. So stay tuned. Great, let's move into our update. So big picture, if you've been following along, you will know that we're in the middle of a significant infrastructure transformation that is really all about creating more flexible, resilient systems. So think of it as moving from something fixed or immobile to something much more modular and adaptable. So I'm going to start with a couple of things that are happening right now. We've got the Hum app migration, and this is a good strategic win with some great learning opportunities, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So the Hum app is now successfully running on the new Holo network. So that's the Allograph network. And like any complex system transition, there's a lot of learning in that process. So we identified two specific technical challenges along the way. One was an error, a 403 error, where we had these multiple web bridge instances from the same machine accessing Holochain. So that was a good one. And then another one we saw was an internal server threshold issue where when we were accessing certain payloads. I know that sounds like a little bit of mumbo jumbo, and that's fine for those of you who aren't super technical, but we like to give a little bit of like detail and meat in the tech side of it too. But the strategic context of that is that these aren't roadblocks. These are just the kind of issues. They're exactly the kind of issues and edge cases that you want to discover and solve when you're doing controlled migration scenarios. And we're prioritizing these now as web bridge issues before we decommission the rest of the legacy network so that we do methodical, careful progress. And so that's really good news. And also, congratulations for Hum. Public API and orchestrator, some updates on our foundational layer. So this is where things are super exciting at an infrastructure perspective. Our development of the orchestrator components, the API and the orchestrator components is complete, and we can now run apps using containers on holoports. So this is really important, and we're kind of doing all of this in a test environment now. This week, we're really focused on our end-to-end testing of new workload deployments using the API and orchestrator. And then we're also getting ready to do a demo at the Vola Community Days event. So just a quick thing, a strategic shift here is you may have noticed that we're adopting an API first language. Well, it's a mindset that is really going to flow with all of our future feature development. And it's not just about technical elegance. It's really about creating a foundation for rapid, scalable development cycles. Other orchestrator functionalities like workload deletion will roll out incrementally, and that's kind of as our way that we enhance the API, we can keep adding functionality. On the Cloud Console UI, we've paused some of the development just until next week. We've been working on this, and this is just a resource allocation. So we're prioritizing the API and orchestrator functionality because that is what primarily enables our community and customers to deploy applications quickly. Excuse me. The UI is what we see as a secondary use. But in the interim, our team is managing API keys directly, and it's not our long-term solution. That's where people are going to get in, access, and create their own API keys and be able to do their deployments all self-service. So And yeah, next thing up is the static site hosting. We're in basically a technical discovery phase. If you kind of listen to what I'm saying and follow along on the roadmap, these are all milestones that are out on our roadmap right now. And I don't have any major updates about the static site hosting other than to say it's one of the most important things on the roadmap, and we've got two different milestones for it because it's critical to our hosting expansion and being able to do a lot of the work that we want to do with not just holochain applications, but regular web hosting and static asset hosting. So great. There'll probably be a few other things that you might see in the dev bites but I'll leave all that for the next call. Just a little um, strategic context related to these kind of updates. What you're seeing here really, these are systematic infrastructure evolution. Each piece, the API, the orchestrator, the network migrations, they're all part of creating this more flexible, developer-friendly platform that can adapt to emerging technological needs. We're building for the long term, but also solving immediate challenges methodically. So yeah, that's I think the takeaway really to understand as we move through the milestones on the roadmap. Okay, let's jump into questions. We've got the ones we collected this week and whatever comes in live. So let's fire away. All right, so we have a whole bunch of questions that came in from a Reddit thread. I'm going to kind of address a bunch of these all together for you guys. I'm going to take them first, but I just want to give a little bit of context for these specifically because the questions need to, I'll read them and I'll answer them just like to do all the others. But the thing is the questions come in with an angle and a bunch of assumptions, and sometimes those assumptions don't really make sense to us. And so I just want to say first, we began this as a project. Holo and Holochain it was one project, one enormous vision is what I'd say with a lot of technical dependencies or interdependencies. And we've argued for years internally whether or not we have one community or multiple communities. And I would say really what we have is this one large community with a lot of different opinions. Also, a lot of different values and motivations. And I think this is a healthy diversity. But it also means that it can be hard to talk to everybody at once and in the same way. So these questions that are being asked that are focused to a large degree on unit, actually, and to some degree on our restructure of Holo, um, they're, while they might not make real sense, or I might have to like re-answer, like recontextualize them a little bit as I go. They're really important because they have real questions underneath them. So that's why we're bringing them in here and answering them. And you know the drill. There's going to be things I can answer, things I can't answer because I don't know. Maybe I said that backwards. I don't know. And then there's going to be some things that I can't answer right now, and that we'll have to push off. But let's go through now. So, is Unit a for-profit entity? And if so, what mechanisms, if any, are in place to ensure that profits generated by Unit are reinvested into the Holo ecosystem or align with the interests of hot token holders? So Unit, I believe, is a for-profit entity. I will let them answer in the specific. But the more important thing to understand is that it's owned by the Holochain Foundation, which is a nonprofit entity, and it's in a foundation in Gibraltar. So the same as Holo, it's owned by Holochain Foundation. So it's not separate, it's not outrun for the benefit of some other group. It's already for the benefit of this ecosystem and this group of people. So did Unit receive any intellectual property or technology developed using hot ICO funds? And if so, blah, blah, blah. How was this transfer? Authorized value? Do you know if there's formal agreement? Okay, or if the community was informed. Sorry, the questions are long. So no, on intellectual property, we didn't transfer or assign any IP to the unit company, and that was very explicit. Some of these things were all about, just to step back again, another context thing. When you go through a restructure, you've got to look at a lot of different things. You've got to look at like the legal implications. You've got to look at the financial implications. You've got to look at jurisdictional and regulatory implications. So we had to take our time. We made a decision about something around the restructure, and then we had to work through it to get all of those things right. And I would say we've done a pretty good job of that, and it's still a little bit underway in the sense that these transitions don't happen all at once. So Unit is owned by the Holochain Foundation. It's incorporated in another jurisdiction, and the relationship between Holo and Unit is actually contractual. So there was no IP that they took with them. They actually have rebuilt technology from the ground up. Now, they have developers and people that went to that organization that have know-how and that sort of thing. But they're under contract back to Holo for some of the things that Holo is having them build. And that's a really important distinction because the way that is structured is, in a way that it really works for Holo and for hot holders and everybody associated with the organization. Is there any public documentation that outlines the legal and operational separation between Holo Limited and Unit? It's not public. Like I said, it's contractual. What governance, if any, was involved in deciding to spin off the core infrastructure development to a separate entity? Well, to be blunt, it wasn't going to happen inside of the structure that we had. I mean, the reason we did this restructure is we were trying to manage three very difficult high-tech projects kind of inside of one. And I just described the the differences that you get with the community and the diversity and the motivations. The same is absolutely true for the technology and how we were building it. We're doing so much more, so much faster now that we're separated because we can focus on what does this component, this modular piece of value that we were talking about in our green paper, how can that be developed and how can it be made most effective, profitable, useful, all of those things. This is true for Holo's infrastructure. This is true for Unit's mutual credit accounting infrastructure. And this is true for Holochain Foundation and the Holochain infrastructure for peer-to-peer technology. This is really critical. Each organization has separate governance. Each organization, though, is owned by the foundation. So at the end of the day, it goes back to the way that the foundation is run by a group of trustees, which is something that is evolving and growing, and you can get more information from the foundation on that. So I'm going to keep moving on. Can the Holochain Foundation or Holo Limited provide a transparency report or third-party audit detailing units, funding sources, governance model, and alignment with the hot ICO commitments? I think that's interesting. I think the Holochain Foundation can probably speak to this a little bit more, and maybe there's more that can be written out that's pushed out. The Holo as a company that's owned by the foundation, we have regular board meetings, we have reports that we put out, directors' reports that we put out. We provide those to the foundation essentially. I don't I assume that other companies that are owned by the foundation work similarly. But at the level of the foundation, I think that they're working towards becoming a much more connected out into the community. Part of this restructure is operationalizing or was to operationalize a foundation as well. And so it's moving into a new way of interacting with community. I don't want to over speak for that. I'm going to leave that to Eric Harris Brown, who is the executive director of the foundation, to go into more detail when they're ready. Will Unit remain a wholly owned subsidiary of Holo Limited? No, not of Holo, but yes to the foundation. I don't know, and I'm not going to promise about everything about the future because really you make business decisions that meet the timing and the what's necessary in the environment. So it may not be best for either the foundation, for all of our stakeholders, or anything else for things to be promised to always stay the same. In fact, I think that would be crazy. Really, pivot is a requirement if you want to stay nimble and be doing business and be successful. And when I say business, I mean it in all contexts, whether it's business in the context of a foundation or a for-profit or a public benefit corporation or all the other structures that exist. But the question is what safeguards are in place to prevent Unit from drifting into private control without community oversight? Right now, that's the Holochain Foundation. They get to decide. They have to approve how those things go. So. Wow, there's a whole bunch more. Is Unit currently engaging with third-party client partners outside of the Holo ecosystem? That is definitely a question for Unit. They want to know how those things will be shared back with the ecosystem. I think we should be worried more about how do we get to it being funding that really makes everything pay for itself. That's the first goal. We're not at the level of that being profitable. I don't need you think you need to worry about there being any form of extraction happening yet. So, but a good question nonetheless. How was the transition of developer and operational teams from Holo to Unit managed? Are former Holo contributors now working exclusively for Unit? Who pays them, and how are their priorities aligned with Holo's ecosystem success? Well, the whole transition was aligned with Holo's ecosystem success. We wouldn't have done it otherwise. We're all have been interconnected, kind of starting from that same beginning point with our green paper. And this was what we thought was going to make it work. It wasn't working before. We couldn't do certain things, and we were on top of each other, pulling in different directions. And so this is the reason why we did this. In terms of, let's see, did I get all that question? Who pays them? Okay, so there's a whole bunch of like operational structural things. We have shared services agreements between the companies for a period of time for the transition, at which point, after that period of time, they'll have to take on doing, paying for things themselves. That was agreement. Part of that, the way that works out is through the contractual arrangement, like we're paying them to do things for Holo. We want what they're building. They're building things that Holo essentially has promised to use in the future and that we need in our future roadmap. So I think that's how to understand that. The same could be said for how we're interacting with the Holochain Foundation, except because they own us and they're nonprofit, we have different ways of structuring it. Does Unit have or plan to introduce any form of community governance or public accountability? I have no idea. That is definitely a question for one of their AMAs. How can stakeholders provide input or monitor decisions directly impacting Holo Platform's roadmap? That's great. What kinds of decisions do you want to impact? What sorts of things are you looking for on our roadmap? We're very curious about that. We're always open to receive information. That's why we do this AMA every month. And if there's other ways that you want to communicate those with us, we have a help desk. You're welcome to send things in. We're also going to be looking at how do we reach out to our ecosystem, all of our stakeholders, a little bit more than we have. In the past, we've done a lot to send surveys to developers. Most of that has been on behalf of the Holochain Foundation. We did some surveys right when we did the restructure to sort of get a feel for what people in the Holo community were looking for, or what kinds of apps they really wanted to see working on Holo. That informed some of the decisions about getting the static assets or some of the milestones regarding being able to host things that aren't just Holo applications, Holochain applications on our roadmap. So that's how we do it, but we'll be doing more of that. Does Unit or will Unit publish a public roadmap or transparency report? I think that's up to Unit about how they do it. I think they're saying a lot of things that really answer this question, how they fit into the ecosystem's long-term vision. They're building core technology, application technology infrastructure for mutual credit accounting. If you go back to our green paper, this was one of our fundamental promises for the community. That is how they're kind of fitting into this ecosystem long-term vision. There is so much that is about the evolution of holochain applications, the ecosystem of mutual credit, and how we can use that kind of system in the future for a payment system for Holo. So I think the questions are really great, but we feel like what we've done is specifically to enable this to work better. So I think that's it for answering all of that big series of questions. I'm going to move on to a bunch of stuff that's come in. Is HumHive the one and only customer? No. There's a couple of other projects that are using Holo right now, and some that are onboarding and some that are in the funnel. Things are not secret. We've talked about them before. There's people listed on our projects listed on our website, and we'll continue to add them and talk about them as they come out. Is there, besides known projects, already demand, meaning the first paying customers for the hosting offerings offered on the new website? If yes, how many agreements are entered in? Well, this is kind of the same thing. We have a funnel for some of this project. Some of those things are available. Right now, we're primarily still offering services to holochain application projects, but what we're preparing for is to be able to do other types of projects. So that will open up how we build out our funnel and how we build out our sales. How far is Holo with the UI interface for hosts? I think I talked about that in the update, so I'm going to skip that one. Is there an estimate of when we can do the hot token swap to Holo Fuel or whatever it's called? I don't have an answer on that specifically in terms of time. What I will say is that we are definitely working up a lot of strategic stuff on this. We had to sort of like take a little bit of a breather, I'd say, from some of these kinds of things for the first 4 months or so of after our restructure. We needed to really like get our grounding and focus on that separation of how we build the different tech infrastructure to meet the three different main things we promised in the green paper, which is building out holochain, peer-to-peer infrastructure, building out a hosting infrastructure that can connect peer-to-peer technology to the internet today, and then also building out mutual credit accounting currencies that can actually power this different economy, peer-to-peer economy. So those are the three major pillars, I would say, of the green paper, and that's what these three organizations kind of represent. So that or when or when will the new website be hosted by Holo Hosting? I love that question. It is not currently hosted by Holo Hosting. We're not quite ready for that, but the basically the milestones that are coming in the end of Q2, beginning and also in Q3, these are really fundamental milestones for being able to do exactly that. And we're kind of holding our own infrastructure, like our own website infrastructure, uh, as the requirement for how do we make this work? How do we test this? So we'll probably be doing something like our website in parallel on Holo Hosting before we get it all tested and launched. But that's super exciting because there's a lot of different things that can be done once we do that, because there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of websites that are built like ours. Ours is a static website, which means it's generated with code, but then all of the files are static files. What you see is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files just sitting up on servers, which is why we think this is going to be a great opportunity for Holo hosting and people getting their projects built on distributed infrastructure. Okay, we have a really fun question next. I'm going to try to get through this. Um, can you explain what a node is, please? Are they holoports? Do you plan to use other types of nodes, like people's computers or others? What is the storage capacity of a node? Anyway, it goes on. I'm going to read some of those later. So let me start at the top. It's got to be confusing, and this is one of those things. I love that we had to kind of deal with the restructure in all three organizations, because this question, if you're looking at the Holo website, means one thing. And if you're looking at the Holochain website, probably means another thing. The concept of node is generic, but in Holo, a node is on our network typically is a holoport. Yes, and what that means is it's a node in our distributed network that is able to provide compute bandwidth and storage. Um, a holoport is also somewhat of a generic term, because a holoport is any server computer that is basically got an OS, like the right OS, and is connected to our centralized infrastructure for Holo, that is running distributed infrastructure as well. So basically, a holoport is a node, and a node basically just has to be running a certain kind of OS and application infrastructure so that it can connect with other nodes on our network and be managed by the orchestrator that we've been talking about today, so that the API and orchestrator can have things get deployed across the network to the different nodes. So yes, what is the storage capacity? What is, that depends on each one. Each one can be different. Can it be somebody's computer? Yes. Can it be a server in Iraq? Sure. Yes, it can be almost anything, because really it just has to map to that definition that I made earlier. How many nodes exist already? Actually, I don't have that answer right now. We've had anywhere from, like, across the last 6 to 8, 7 years, we've had anywhere from a couple of hundred nodes to thousands of nodes running on the network. And I don't know what we have open or available right now. Sometimes they go on, sometimes they go off, depending on how we're using them and what kinds of incentives there are for keeping them on the network. So, what is our plan with the production and the dissemination of nodes worldwide? Well, they already are all over. They already are listed. They already are in different parts of the world, and we allow applications when they're coming in to like do their deployments, say, well, where do they need the services to be so that the orchestrator can pick the nodes that are in the right places to do the deployments. Our new holoport's coming. We are not currently we're not currently in a process to like bring new holoports on. We're focused more on bringing applications and customers onto the network, and we'll get back to concerns about building out the nodes on the network later. So that kind of answers the last couple there. Do you folks leverage the strengths and capabilities of AI? Who, where, and how? Internally, operationally, sure, we use some AI, just like anybody in business, I would say these days is doing it. The reality is AI has been being used in applications like Adobe for a long time, and it just wasn't named. But the way you ran all those filters, the way it did a bunch of the learning to be able to do all of that has been AI. Now there's just different generalized ways of doing it. So yes, were we doing it inside of our products? No. Will I be able to host apps on my own Holoport, run my own apps like backup, email, static website? That's a great question. I don't know that like we have two different distinctions about how things get orchestrated onto holoports. One is sort of like the running one's own apps, and we had a conversation about self-hosted apps and holochain on holoports early on in like back in 2019, 2020, and we sort of set that aside while we were working on the broader how do we get apps running across the network that are other people's apps on the network. I don't know that we've come back to that just yet. It also depends. Are you talking about email, like a form of email that's built on Holochain? Or are you talking about email that's just standard email like SMTP? Because those things are quite different. I think we're starting with static websites and static content, static assets first, and those are the milestones that are coming this year in the Q2, Q3 time frame that we're really focused on. Can we expect to see fully functional holo hosting and holochain fully developed platform in 2026? So fully functional holo hosting, we are doing fully functional holo hosting. We're doing always on nodes as fully functional holo hosting. I don't know what the definition would be other than that. WebBridge also is the other part of that functionality, which is allowing holochain applications and the data within DHTs to be accessed directly from the internet. So we are there. We are doing that. A fully developed platform. Platforms are never fully developed. There's no hosting platform in the world that's done. You start off and you iterate your products, and that's what we're doing. Um, great. There's a couple of things that may have come in the chat. Um, let me just see if there's something. I don't have an update on listings right now. Those will come out with as announcements when we have them. Let's see. Is there anything else? I don't see anything else. I think we're done. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure to be here with you guys. I am super excited about some of the stuff that's coming up that we're not yet ready to share, but we'll be out there, we'll be engaging. And I really did mean it. The part about questions or ideas or things that you guys want, if you guys have those, we're really open. We want to know what the community wants and needs. We want to know what stakeholders, whether you're a hot holder, whether you're building holochain applications, whether you're looking at getting something hosted on Holo, all of it, all of that matters to us. So bring those questions in, bring those ideas in, and we're all ears. So thanks everyone. See you next time.